First of all, the way society views mathematics and studying mathematics, it should be now the greatest time. You should wear as a badge of honour that you're taking on difficult mathematics subjects in high school. Is that the case, or is there still this perverse social attitude towards mathematics that makes it harder to convince students that it's where they should want to be? I'll start with our two teachers, and I'll get some thoughts from here as well. Jacqui?
Well, certainly, it's very common when we have parent-teacher interviews and you've got a student who's performed poorly and one of the parents says, "Don't worry, darling, it's okay. I was never very good at maths." So, of course, there goes any hope of getting this poor little darling up there and doing maths. And, of course, then I turn around when mum or dad are not listening and say, "Do you know what? You don't have to be like mum and dad. You can be an individual and do something different." So it's really hard to break down what goes on at home, where it's okay to be rubbish at maths and it's okay, don't do your homework because you've got piano to do, or you've got to go and play tennis, or you've got all sorts of other things because that's more important than doing your maths homework. So I think there's quite a lot of stigma around this, it's okay. It's okay. And what do you think, Eddie?
Eddie, because you would also, at the parent teachers, do the English teachers ever come up to you and say that they've just had a parent saying, "Spelling, I'm pretty crap at that, but that's cool"? Or I get the impression not being great at maths is something you can more easily talk about than parents would never admit in front of their kids they can't spell or don't know what a comma is.
I think it's part of Western cultural identity that if you want to shoot a film and you want to make a character look like they're having a terrible time at school, you put them in their maths class. And you want Jack Black to look cool in School of Rock, and you make him say to the kid in the bottom at the back of the class, he says, "What about math? Isn't that important?" He says, "No, math's not cool. Math doesn't matter." And that's just part of that's almost like it's a trope. It's a cultural trope to say, yeah, well that's cool. I can tick the box and I can identify that. And I definitely think I even have students who are really quite strong at mathematics, and they're a little bit sort of ashamed. You're like, even to me, the maths guy, they're like, "Sir," they just sort of look left, look right, like, "Okay, no one's watching," and they say, "I'm actually really interested in taking on Extension 2 for next year, and am I going to be capable of that?" And there's this huge amount of self-doubt.
Andrew, what is society's view of the importance of studying maths?
I think that there are some people who think that studying maths is really important because it is good for their careers, or that they can do the number stuff so that other people don't have to. But I think that for a lot of people who do maths in academics, or who actually spend a lot of time using mathematics, they find it to be a deeply creative process. And I think that that's one of the things that is a big disconnect between the public perception of maths and what's sort of important about maths, in that it lets you be creative in terms of analysing, structuring, and utilising the power of patterns. Instead, what we have is that, you're just training to install a calculator. That's what maths is about. Whereas you can do a whole lot of maths without any numbers at all.
Lily, you fight this on more than one front, not only that, being a mathematician, but being a young woman with a media career as well and good at mathematics. That's not the way that society sees typical mathematicians. What are your thoughts on this part of the subject?
Well, yeah, absolutely. This is something that I strive to challenge, that stereotype of what it means to study mathematics. But I think that an important piece of the puzzle here is also the perception of where mathematics can lead you, and what jobs mathematics opens up. And I think, if I'm brutally honest, at the end of year 12, all I knew was that I really enjoyed mathematics, and I wanted to do something with it, but I didn't really know where it could lead to. I did a maths and finance degree. In the end, I decided finance wasn't for me. I didn't really know what finance was. I just knew that it was kind of like that uses mathematics, and I knew that the finance industry was, an industry that I could use my skills in. But I think that particularly in the last maybe couple of decades, the table has turned, and the need for mathematics skill sets has drastically increased. And there's been a bit of a lag in communication to kids and students that this need is really high amongst, and this is why like so many bigger companies are investing, like BHP Billiton, for example, is investing $22 million to get more girls into maths through the Australian Mathematical Science Institute. And there are countless examples of big banks trying to get more kids into it. But I don't think that the message has reached the students yet.
Can I ask, but are we giving our teachers the ideal curriculum with which they can encourage it? And I'm not psychic, but I knew that was going to be the reaction. So why do we all sit here knowing for decades now that that's going to be the reaction about curriculum and whether it empowers or stifles teachers? What's it like at the coalface? And I know you have some ideas about the theory of it. What's it like with the? I mean, I've never taken a class across a whole journey. I just pop my head in occasionally, but I'd personally hollow out about at least somewhere between a third and a half of it.
Oh, easily. I think we spend our lives, and I mean all of you here will attest to this, we spend our lives chasing our tails trying to get through the curriculum whilst still trying to think of how can we do something that's exciting and imaginative. Let's let the kids explore. Oh, they didn't explore the right thing. Sorry, that wasn't the right dot point. We've got to move on now. You're always trying to tick boxes of, yes, we've done everything. And in the back of our minds, we're thinking, we want our kids to explore. We want them to enjoy the journey of mathematics, and they don't have the time. They really don't have the time to enjoy. And when they're exploring something and it's not going the direction that this particular lesson's supposed to have it going, then as a teacher we all panic and go, oh, we're supposed to be learning this. Well, what's wrong with learning something else?
I'm actually going to go out on them because I think that Mo talked before about the importance of making sure that we have practical steps. And I think as a teacher, it's easy to beat up on Nessa because it's a big, faraway object that's not even part of the Department of Education anymore. Like, they decide to set up camp on their own. And so it can be easy to sort of look at external constraints and say, actually, you know what? My job is really hard and I have all these external things that have been placed on me that just make it harder, and that's my excuse. I think there are reasons why we can say, yeah, these constraints do make things harder, but I want to go on record saying that I don't think the syllabus is the problem. The first sentence in the rationale of the K-10 mathematics syllabus in New South Wales is, mathematics is a reasoning and creative activity. It's the first sentence. And then when you look at the 5 working mathematically proficiencies, we want kids to be able to, yes, have fluency in multiplication and calculus and all that kind of thing, but we also want them to communicate and problem solve and understand and reason. It's there in the syllabus. I actually think the main problem is assessment, because we teach children what we value by assessing those things. Now, not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that can be measured matters. But at the same time, I think the structure of assessment, it takes this fluency type thing, right? It's like, good Lord, I can do 50 derivatives and make sure I can find the max min for every single one of these, and I can do my neighborhood test, and I'm really good at that. And we take those students, and they're the ones who get the stamp and say, I'm good at mathematics because I'm fast, I'm accurate, I have a pretty good memory. And these are the students we reward. These are the students who are getting good marks. And I think that that's producing the wrong kind of student. The kids aren't dumb. They're here, right? They know, okay, if I've got to do well in an exam, this is how I'm going to do that. And you know what? Actually, it turns out, I can tell from the way my school and my teachers work with me that they don't really care if I can actually explain what does continuity mean and what does it matter.
Now, we hear about students being tempted to go down to lower levels of mathematics as they're told you're just going to absolutely blitz that, you'll get 98 out of that, and do a little bridging course when you get to university. And other people say that doesn't actually work as a tactic, you're actually more likely to get scaling. What is the situation with scaling at the moment, both the realities and the message that students are being given, and do you think it's a big issue? Just a little easy yes-no question.
Gosh. Look, with scaling, definitely, I'm seeing students who are playing the scaling game. We've got countless girls who will be doing general maths and are perfectly capable of doing mathematics. I, unfortunately, had a son who, God forbid, did exactly that. And it paid for him. He was in the top 1% of the state in general maths, and he chuffed off to ANU in Canberra and went and studied politics and didn't even need it in the end anyway. So, you know, there are a lot of students who are playing the scaling game. They are benefiting to a certain extent, but I think it's a false benefit, because then, you know, if you're going to go into, for example, engineering or, you know, some of those more technical courses without having done the appropriate level of maths and do a bridging course which is going to teach you 2 years worth of high school maths, I think you're crazy. But this is what a lot of the students are doing. They go and do psychology without maths. I mean, I did psychology in my degree, and the amount of stats in there just blows your mind. And these kids go, yeah, that's fine, I can pick that up. And they really can't. And then what happens to them, once they're out of our hands, they're struggling at university, and in the university, how many kids fail first year because their maths is too weak?
You've seen this firsthand.
Yeah, so it's the more and more these sorts of, you have to do mathematics if you're doing a science degree, and you have to do mathematics if you're doing engineering, and that's well and good. But a lot of students don't realise that they don't, you know, we're asking these students to make these decisions when they're 15, 16 years old about what level of mathematics they're going to need for the rest of their careers. And sometimes they don't choose correctly. So what, we've got a 3-week bridging course to try and bring them up to speed. Yeah, there's so the course that I taught was called Foundations of Calculus, trying to get 2 years worth of calculus crammed into one semester. A lot of tears and a lot of fails. And it's heartbreaking, because sometimes they have passed every other subject in their course. They've passed everything except for this one subject. Yeah. And they're like, I'm so ready to go out into the workforce and do whatever it is. And then there's just this course that's holding me back. Because even then, when they've finished all the rest of their courses, they still don't see how it fits in. Yeah.
Sydney Uni are moving from assumed knowledge to prerequisite in mathematics for a host of subjects from 2019 onwards, and that's received mainly very positive.
It's good.
What's going on with the whole scaling thing? What's the message students are getting, Eddie? How do we stop people playing the scaling game? And does playing the scaling game even work?
So, I can state some official things. I mean, people who are watching the New South Wales math scene at the moment know that the thing that's coming in 2019, we're going to get it for, sorry, I take that back. Coming for 2020, we're going to get our first full proper all HSC new courses in 2019, but there are some loud voices that have put a cat amongst the pigeons. But by 2020, we'll have a common scale just like English does, which means that if you are in standard, as compared to advanced, there's going to be that locked-in portion of the courses which cover algebra, statistics, a little bit of financial. It's enough common content that we can say, all right, this student who's performing in standard, we can align them to someone in advanced, and we can know, as opposed to just saying, you know, using the regular mechanisms for scaling and having a look at, well, there's really smart people doing general right now. So let's reward that, because that's the way that the model works right now with UAC. So that hopefully will actually work to stem the tide. It'll mean a lot of unhappy people who are going to choose standard, and there are going to be a lot less band 6s out there to choose from. But really for me, what this feels a little bit like is a band-aid, to be honest. Because a system like this is an economic fix to a social problem. I think the real issue, I mean, a lot of people have asked me, oh, do we make maths mandatory? Does that fix the problem? And I think that it's great if a society is willing to say, we value something enough to make it mandatory. I like that. But it's not the fix of the problem, because really the issue stems from, well, you know what, the reason why back in the day they were laying those foundations, and that's why by the time they get to Andrew, they're in so much trouble, is because there's a real disconnect between what mathematics actually is, how it's learned, and therefore when they get to year 10, and then that 15, 16-year-old, and they're having to make a decision about what matters for them for the future, why would they put a subject that more or less is the meaningless repetition of arbitrary and somewhat contradictory rules for a game they don't even want to win? They don't care about answering. That gives them no satisfaction, because they can just predict what the questions will be. Why would they choose something that actually will extend them, help them learn and see the world through a different lens? That's not what mathematics is to them. And so I feel as though I'm really glad that UAC and NESA are making a move to do that, but it's kind of a band-aid on the core of the problem.
And how do we get people who could contribute at a place like Atlassian And even Atlassian goes reasonably well, but how do we get people who could contribute to a place or contribute fantastically teaching in schools to say no to big corporate gigs that the maths will give them the entree to?
I get contacted on LinkedIn maybe 3 times a day for data science or analyst jobs. They can't fill them enough. And they're like, do you have any friends? There are so many jobs out there that require mathematical skill sets.
On the issue, it's even more pronounced, as far as I understand it, with female students,
Absolutely.
girls and young women.
Yep.
In your experience, is that the case, and how bad a situation is it? And then from you, Eddie, is there a point, you've taught in both elite selective schools and very good general government high schools, is there a point in the journey where you see girls really falling off the cliff of pursuing high-level mathematics? I'll start with you, Jacqui.
Okay, well, we certainly see a lot of girls will balk away from doing high-level mathematics and not consider careers. For example, engineering, well, that's a bloke sort of thing to do. If you watch television, where are all the girls in the high-powered jobs? Go watch LA Law, go watch all these TV programs about lawyers, and that's where all the girls are, and they're all dressed fabulously and they're having wonderful lives, and the girls go, oh yeah, I kind of like that, that's what I'd like to be.
Marrying Prince Harry.
Yeah. But where are our public images of girls doing really good mathematics things? Lily's a brilliant example of a gorgeous girl doing mathematics and having a fabulous career that, if I stood her up in front of my girls and said, listen to what she has to say and what she does, they're all going, yeah, I'd like to do that. But they don't know about these things. They don't know that there are wonderful careers like that out there. I came from a family of mathematicians. Both my parents are mathematicians. And I went into a field that was all men.
In terms of the messages given to women who do stay in the system and are quite good at it in their upper years, and I one day just fortuitously was jogging on a beach and started a conversation with someone, and it was the woman who'd won the medal for applied mathematics at Sydney Uni in about 2006. And once you get to the level of university medalists in applied mathematics, it really does start to skew towards blokes.
Yes.
And she was just a gun. But what she said that was very interesting, the school she was at was a girls' private school. And she was clearly the standout mathematician of her generation in that school. There was another handful of her mates who were really quite good at extension too. But she felt there was a subtle message given to girls when you get to the end of year 12. If you're good at maths, but you're good at anything else as well, you should probably do the anything else. And if the maths helps you get towards the anything else, that's great. Whereas boys are more subtly told, if you're good at maths, good, end of discussion, let's go and do computing, engineering, etc. It's not as blatant as that. But is there a subtle messaging given that seems to steer the girls who do hang in there till the end of year 12 and have the potential not to pursue it further?
Well, I think it's a message that can be broken down. We've got a very strong extension course at our school, and we get quite a lot of girls proportionately that go through. We've accelerated them from year 9. We've got them thinking way back early that you can be good at this maths, you can enjoy it. That's the big factor.
Where's the sweet spot? Where do you need to get them? You're saying year 9, year 8?
We're getting them year 9, and even in year 8, the girls who are looking like they're going to go to acceleration, I've asked the teachers, look, you need to be getting these girls' mindsets on, that's where you're going. You're the kind of person that can do this. You are very capable. And I think girls feel very often that they can't do it. They're hesitant very often, and they need a lot more encouragement. Boys, I look at my son, oh yeah, I'll have a go at that, got that wrong, oh well, never mind. Whereas girls will internalise it, oh my goodness, I'm a dreadful person because I made a mistake. And that's something we have to get over with our girls. So we start them really early and really work on their mindset, their attitude to, you can do this.
I'm a teacher in a girls' school and constantly trying to promote mathematics with girls and to take the high-level subjects. And each year I try and find a female mentor to come in and speak to them about their career paths, how they got there, to make it achievable for the girls. But I really search hard to find those female mentors. So what's the maths community doing in finding mentors out there in industry and so on to take it to the schools to to, discuss it even with teachers so they know what sort of career paths that there's available to them. How did women get through and what did they do and how they got there? We need people like that within the community of maths in industry to come out and do that. So what's the maths community doing about that?
Jacqui, have you got anything to share on that?
Well, to be honest, I've just knocked on the door of Atlassian and said, I need some people to do exactly that. And they've come forward with about 8 girls, and I specifically said, I want women to come out. I've got 8 girls coming out, now I've got to figure out what to do with them.
Fantastic.
So, it's a matter of asking. And, I saw, to me, Atlassian is an awesome example of what's possible. And I thought, well, they're the people I'd like to come and talk to my girls. So I asked.
Can I jump in for a second, then I'll get Lou to make a comment too here. On behalf, as someone who, and I don't do it as much now, I live a significant distance from Sydney, but would go and visit schools as well. Crucial thing, if you do then have someone who is going to come out, have a quality engagement with that person beforehand about what's going to happen, what they would like when they get here, and give some thought to it, because so often people sometimes get to that first step of then securing someone who's going to come out. Teachers are too busy to give it much thought. That person's really busy because they're working there full time, and they get there and it's just not a quality engagement.
Yep.
Whereas you're more likely, if the first time that person interacts with you, it really works for them and the students are zinging, to have that person want to come back or establish something that actually goes forward and goes a few steps. Lily, you would have experienced this sort of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even after having done a bit of TV work, I still find it quite daunting, believe it or not, speaking to a group of people. So if you can prep the speaker beforehand, I think that's definitely advantageous. But in terms of where to find them, I mentioned before that BHP Billiton has put in a chunk of money in association with an organisation called the Australian Mathematical Sciences Institute. I've been on this institute's board for about 5 years. I've recently resigned, but they have a program called Choose Maths, and it's designed to get girls into maths, and they have a whole host of female ambassadors, including myself, but there are a whole host of women on there that maybe you can think about reaching out to.
Excellent. We have a microphone, just one spot in front of where it was. What would you like to ask?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a very interesting experience in class today. Because I'm AP at the moment, I happen not to be teaching a maths class, but I had a class that I knew had the students in the top 2 maths classes. So it's subject selection time. I happened to mention to them, I'm very excited, I'm going to see Adam Spencer and a whole range of other people this afternoon, expecting them to be really excited as well and knowing who Adam Spencer was.
You're about to crush me, aren't you?
So it went on to subject selection, and I said, oh, how many of you are going to pick Extension 1 Maths? I had just a handful. And some of them piped up and said, why don't you ask how many of us are going to do any maths at all?
Oh.
And it absolutely floored me. I could not believe it. So I started to delve into, well, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And they said, oh, but miss, we get 68% in maths, 5.3, but we get 80% in history. Oh, I was horrified. I went straight into a lesson on mean, standard deviation, Z-scores. It was just so eye-opening. I had to explain to them that a 68 in maths could mean, an 88 in history. They had no idea. And I think it speaks to what we were talking about before, Jacqui, about mindsets and the growth mindset and that performance orientation that a lot of our students have, especially girls, and how to turn that around, because the boys seem to be a lot more growth mindset. They're not afraid to make mistakes, and they're not afraid to learn from them.
Excellent, thank you. I'll throw to Lily in a second. I'll give you one quick one that I like too. The example I always go back to is in America, the AMC, the American Mathematics Competition, the big annual competition in mathematics. when you look at the very elite performers in that, you're talking absolutely unbelievably genius kids, and it skews massively towards boys. And it makes some people ask, at the ultra elite level, are boys just better at maths than girls? And it's a very complicated question, but I saw a great piece of research in that once from a team of people who'd gone through and looked at the top, I think it might have been the top 100 boys in the AMC each year. And you're talking unbelievable mathematicians, and they broke them down by all these different sorts of things. And they looked at the top 100 girls. Now, to get to the 100th girl, you had to go a fair way past the 100th boy, but you were still talking really, really, really good mathematicians at high school and college level. And when they looked, the main difference was those 100 boys had come from about 70 different schools that were sending one or maybe two kids to that elite band. And the 100 girls had come from more like 20 different schools who were averaging 5, 6, 7 girls getting into that top band. So either by some indescribable statistical fluke, all the girls who were naturally good at maths just happened to pop into these. No, they were schools where there were really professionally run extension courses from an early age that target kids, where there's a couple of teachers who champion mathematics at the highest level, especially for girls, and where a girl in year 7 can see a girl in year 12 walking up and getting a medal for coming third in her state and going, that's going to be me. That's going to be me in 5 years. That sort of thing is really powerful. What do you want to say?
So are you saying that girls aren't as good at maths than boys at it?
I'm not. I think at the absolutely ultra once in a generation elite level, I think you start to get into all sorts of things about Asperger's and all sorts of stuff, and I want to remove that from the conversation because I think that's subtle. The ability for women in a high school situation to perform at the absolutely elite level is not in any way constrained by gender. Let me ask you a question on that. Realistically, we will never see 50% of Atlassian's coding workforce women. We just never will. But is there another?
That's a big word, isn't it?
Burden of proof, please.
And I want your response on that too. Is there a the Atlassian of the future? What do you see it being in terms of most harnessing the potential of everyone to contribute to an organisation like that?
Okay, so number one, I think that your argument is based on the assumption that there is a level playing field, and there isn't. So there was a.
I completely agree. There's not a level playing field. Absolutely.
Let me explain. So there was I recently read a book called You're Not So Smart, and it's about different brain biases that you have. And one chapter was focused on it'll come to me in 2 seconds. So one of the chapters talks about an experiment that was run, and they had two cohorts of people, women and men, both with equal qualifications. Then they had them sitting a test. The first test, a mathematics test. The first test that they were given was they told them this was an easy test, and both cohorts performed the same. And then the next exam that they were given, they told them this is going to be hard, and men typically perform better than women. And they got them to sit the test, and sure enough, the men outperformed the women. The next part of the test or the experiment, they got a brand new set of people, 2 new cohorts, and they got the same thing, easy one. Men and women performed the same. The second one, they told them men and women tend to perform equally on this, and sure enough, men and women. So there is a psychological thing happening here that we understate, and that when you hear that you're not good at something, like collectively women aren't good at this, I think that it sinks down to a particular level and it doesn't form a level playing field. The other piece of the puzzle that we don't often discuss, and maybe we don't, it's not widely known, is that women were actively discouraged from going into the discipline for the longest time, even to our recent history. I've read anecdotes. There's a book called The Mathematics Teacher. There's some anecdotes about Renaissance and how women were thought to have soft, cold brains and weren't able to process information. And then they weren't marriage material if they studied mathematics. And then they, my personal favourite, that it would shrink their ovaries if they studied mathematics. So this kind of discrimination over centuries beats down a group of people, and just like in life, on a micro scale, if you get someone from an early age and tell them they're not good at something, they're bound to believe it. I think it works on a macro scale on society, that women start to feel like that they're not good at it, good enough at it, and anecdotes like that, I think maybe propagate that stereotype.
Can I just say quickly, I agree with you entirely. When I talk about those sort of potential career numbers, I'm saying when you, as much as we can, remove stereotyping and messaging and encouraging everyone to advocate and all that, as much as we can do that, I think you'll end up at something slightly less than 50-50, which isn't necessarily a disaster. But I want to see a situation where careers are 97.3.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the issue, and I think there needs to be a fair bit of pushing to get to 3 up to at least a 10 or something. Before then, natural forces will take over more.
Connect back with what something Eddie said before. It's really that moment when kids are in primary school and they're just doing maths for the first time and they're being told that they've gotten something wrong. Like, what happens to the boy who gets something wrong in mathematics, and they're sitting in the class, and what contributes to the feeling of, yeah, it's okay, you'll get there, this is kind of your subject. Whereas what contributes to the feeling if a girl gets something wrong is, that's okay, this isn't really your subject area. And that first process of when being not afraid to be wrong in public is something I think that is part of mathematics, and that I am no expert, but I've always suspected that might be part of the formula.
I would love for, in mathematics, in education in mathematics, in professionally mathematics, all that kind of thing, I would love there to be 50% representation across genders. But my rationale for why I think that that's a wonderful thing is actually not because men and women are the same, but precisely because they're different and they bring something wonderful and unique to the table. And that's why we need both of them. Because if it was 100% this or that, then we're just missing this huge human perspective, because that's who we are, and we need that diversity across there. So that's my crazy thought, that actually it's because we're different.
G'day, my name is Brent Hoare. Just want to amplify a question I put up on the Twitter feed about how technology can be used to assist some of the lower end students in our schools who may have sometimes massive gaps in their learning. And look, I'm not a maths teacher, or I work as a maths teacher, I'm more of a social and environmental science background, but I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm really excited by some of the products I've discovered. Regrettably only maths-based recently, but Maths Pathways I think has a wonderful assessment of the broad scope of abilities within any class, and how can we harness that more to support people like me trying to do
exactly one of the questions I wanted to ask the panel. What is the role, and I'm not saying it doesn't have to be a plug for Mathspace, but what is the role for the abundance of technology we've got now? Some would think surely that makes it easier teaching mathematics and assessing and keeping track of students than it's ever been before, or is there still a strong case for just good old-fashioned chalk and talk?
If teachers can move towards being guides and facilitators rather than it is this person's job who is in a public school that's underfunded, they're overworked, it is period 4, it's way too hot, and they are the person who is in charge of teaching that classroom full of kids how to do logarithms. When there is resources out there, and connecting those students with those resources, as part of my job, I go around to a lot of different schools, and the divide couldn't be clearer. You go into a school that's well-resourced, and then you go into a school that's not, and you have a very, very different educational experience. So it would be really nice, for starters, for everyone. I do understand what Jacqui was saying in terms of, there is a lot of mathematics that occurs up here, not here. But the promise of something like technology is being able to connect students with people like Eddie, connect students, not for the mathematics, connect students with people like Lily for inspiration. Connecting students with those resources that are right there, rather than constantly having to try and trickle it through this complicated network that we have at the moment.
Students in 2017, over-tested, overworked, overcommitted to other stuff, lazy little narcissistic post-millennial bastards who need a good thrashing like I had when I was a boy. Discuss.
Okay.
Who are... Because in a lot of other gigs I do, I'm constantly told, especially slightly older than high school, but the people who people want to employ now who are 20 years old, the millennials, they're just a different category of person to those who have ever existed before, and they have all these different rules about flexible workspaces and they won't work on Friday. The game has changed. Students, has the game changed? The types of people you are educating now in typically year 9, year 10, what defines them in a way that we need to know to reach out most and harness the mathematician within?
They've got so much to do, and I'm asking them to do homework and they haven't got time, and it goes on. And you know, I find this is a bit of an issue that is coming around. And I say to my girls, you know what, you just got to suck it up and do it. That's all there is to it. It's a little bit like the Nike ad, just do it. Maths is very much about the practice. That, you know, you need to hone your skills before you can get your imagination happening. And, you know, I say to them, remember when you first learnt about Pythagoras and we drilled you on how to do that and you're going, oh my God, this is so boring. And then you finally got the hang of it and now you're using it all the time without even thinking about it. You need to get the skill happening.
I think they said hashtag OMG, this is so boring. They wouldn't say, oh my God.
Yeah, OMG, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I'm a little bit old school here.
Lol.
But, yeah.
Okay, let's wrap it up. You're suddenly in charge of Australia's mathematical world overnight. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. What is the first sweeping reform you bring in that's going to shake mathematics in this country to its very core? I'll start with you, Lily.
I would, I guess, drawing back from my experiences with mathematics and what captured my imagination is maths through storytelling. I would ditch the books, go outside to the beach with the class, and we'd talk about things without pen and paper, and put that emotion in, put that human element in, and take them on a journey.
Fantastic. Andrew?
Not assess based on objective standards, but assess your students on their growth throughout the year. I think that is just a much better way to see student engagement and a lot better way for every student to still achieve well.
I'd love to tap into kids in the primary school. I'd love the high school teachers to be able to get our hands on them in the primary school and get them kind of thinking that they can do this.
Okay, here's the crazy idea. National people who work here, you know. I really think that we need to scrap the A to E requirement for grades on reporting. Here's why. I have nothing against telling students where they're at, but in New South Wales schools, every report you have to get an A, B, C, D or E on some kind of academic outcome. And here's the most heartbreaking thing about that. There's some kid who's been growing. They've been growing from K to 12, and every single year, twice a year, they get a C. And that has a strong message. I'm a C student. That's who I am, that's who I'll always be. And it disguises the fact that, wow, do you know how far you've come? This comes to the assessment and that journey that someone's taken. And it's just frustrating for me how much I have to tell students. Now, here's a report I had to write. I was legally obliged. But by the way, this is what I really think of you. And you can see the look in their eyes when they realise, oh, someone realises I've grown and I've learned something. That's what I love.
That's not crazy. That is beautiful. Please give our panel a big round of applause. The Maths Inspired 27. Any words? Really, Serna?